together, but far from united. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fresh Outlook. I'm Mia Toski. As we have all heard by now, Scotland woke up Friday united, but divided among themselves. Now the question, can a divided Scotland heal? We're going to be talking about the bid to end a 307-year union with Great Britain and what the future looks like. We will also talk about the powerful floods that hit Kashmir and the health crisis that the region is now facing. And a different kind of crisis in the National Football League. One of the most powerful and wealthiest organizations in the United States is being slapped with accusations, and millions of dollars could be at stake. Lots of heavy news, but we do promise to make you smile in the lightning round. Now let's get back to the Scottish referendum vote. Despite a no vote, the United Kingdom still faces a raging anti-establishment tide. Let's take a look and talk it out.
Spirits are high in the No campaign, as Scots decide they're better together with the UK and say no to independence.
I accept that verdict of the people, and I call on all of Scotland to follow suit. Secondly, the Unionist parties made vows late in the campaign to devolve more powers to Scotland. Scotland will expect these to be honoured in rapid course.
Clackmannanshire was the first local council to declare no. It set the momentum for the rest of the results. Although the Yes campaign did have significant wins in Glasgow, Scotland's largest city, and Dundee.
It's a momentous result for Scotland and also for the United Kingdom as a whole. By confirming our place within the Union, we have reaffirmed all that we have in common and the bonds that tie us together. Let them never be broken. We have made a decision for progress and change for Scotland and within the United Kingdom. Come on, Scotland, let's get on with it.
There was a high turnout as 55% of Scots voted to stay in the UK, ensuring that the 307-year-old union between Scotland and the rest of the United Kingdom would continue.
And joining me now is former White House aide Dee Benke, Daniel Friedheim, expert on international politics who's taught it for 10 years after working at the U.S. State Department and World Bank. We have political psychologist Dr. Bart Rossi, and in our Washington, D.C. studios, we have international journalist Tom Squitieri. We welcome all of you and thank you for joining us. Well, I don't know about all of you, just watching this was so amazing, and how politics touched the lives of so many people, nearly everybody in Scotland. But the question that I have for our panel, the first question for you is, did it touch American lives, and did it touch you personally? We'll start with you, Daniel.
Well, I was paying attention partly because my daughter studied abroad in Edinburgh recently, so she was following closely. But not many others I knew.
Well, some people actually describe this as like sort of like the Super Bowl, the OJ trial, and a presidential election all coming together at once. Dr. Bart, what about you?
Well, I thought it was very interesting. As a psychologist, I was thinking about, are these folks going to go for independence, and do they really want to be independent? Psychologists talk about belongingness and being part of something. And obviously, at the end of the day, that's what really won out.
Now, Dee, I know you've got some Scottish roots there. How about yourself?
Yeah, they're all there. So I do not like this at all. I said, look, I mean, every country should be independent. Scotland should have their independence. I mean, they voted that way, and that's fine. However, I feel bad for those who really wanted to have their own country. And there's a long history of this with England, having colonials. And I just think it's wrong. So I do feel for the people who lost.
And Tom, we know you're an international journalist, and thank you for joining us. But we want to ask you, obviously you were following this professionally, but what do you think the tone was in the rest of the country?
I think that most of the United States didn't really pay much attention to it. It's a slow season here. Sports are on their mind, as later the show will talk about. I think had Scotland voted for independence, it would have created more attention, like what happened, how do we miss it? And I also think that the fact that the Loch Ness Monster did not make an appearance really hurts ratings in the United States.
Well, I'm going to stay with you for a minute there, Tom. Do you think that the UK survived out of economic fears?
Look, the interesting polls that weren't showed, Mia, were those taken in England, where overwhelming numbers of English people, those in England, part of the Great Britain, said, let Scotland go. They're all for independence if the different groups want to be independent. But as an economic unit, the economic arguments put forth by those who wanted independence from Scotland based on the revenues of the North Sea oil were really not founded very well. Those wells are starting to dry up already. And the comparison they would make to Norway, where the wells there are still producing and seem to be producing for 30 or 40 more years, were really unfounded. I think Scotland survived an economic bullet, dodged an economic bullet here by staying part of Great Britain and what Great Britain still has to offer all of its citizens. The fact that they won more devolved powers is sort of the best of both worlds, I think.
I think it brings up an interesting point. Are they stronger if they're united or divided? Daniel?
Well, we know, looking at the results, that the vote for independence was strongest in the most depressed parts of Scotland, places like Glasgow with working class backgrounds. So there was that level of economic motivation. But the bottom line was this was an emotional decision, right? It was an irrational feeling of whether you wanted to express your national separateness.
Well, you know, there were a lot of Tories back in the day when we claimed our independence, you know, and those were the rich folks. Those are the ones who wanted, hey, let's stay with England. We got it good. So I understand why the folks that do not have the money and the folks who do not have the prestige, they want their independence. You should be independent. We wanted our independence from England, and so did they. And David Cameron, I have to disagree with Tom, and I rarely do this, but David Cameron was begging. He was going and begging Scotland. Believe me, they did not want to lose the oil, and they did not want to lose the nukes, and they did not want to lose Scotland.
And let's talk about that oil industry.
Dee Dee, I didn't say David Cameron, Dee Dee. I said the people of England. David Cameron obviously didn't want to lose Scotland. In fact, the reason they went ahead with the vote to sort of give it its blessing for voters, Cameron and the Conservative leadership really believed that they would not vote to leave. I'm talking about people in England who were polled, not the government.
Yeah, but I wonder what polls they are. I mean, it's hard to believe that folks in England would want to give up such a powerhouse and a beautiful part of the United Kingdom. So, you know, I just question that poll. But it was split, at least we know. I mean, this was definitely emotional, and people were split in England as well as Scotland.
And I do want to talk about that oil industry, of course. 22 billion pounds, $30 billion. Also employs 200,000 people. So that was certainly a big question as well.
No, so they certainly would have haggled over how much of the oil went to Scotland and how much to the rest of Great Britain for the full 18 months that they were going to spend deciding how to implement a separation.
Yeah. And Dr. Bart, I know you want to jump in.
I think that the oil is a factor. There's many factors that made everybody go in this direction of belongingness again, okay? Mm-hmm. But I think the whole idea of independence brings up a lot of issues. It sounds good, and I am sympathetic to Dee Dee's point here on being independent. However, I think independence means a lot of different things to different people. And at the end of the day here, they thought that maybe it wasn't really the right road to go down.
Well, you also look at the way the country is. There's so much turmoil. Are they better to be stronger together or be separate?
That's what I think they voted on. I think that was the point.
Do you agree with that, Tom Squitieri?
I do. And also the point, to follow up on what he just said, is there are no certainties for Scotland had they become independent. They have to apply to join the EU, for example. Mm-hmm. That's the way the EU is set up.
Fine, let them do it on their own.
In fact, for Catalonia, they did not have a guarantee that they get to use the English pound, even though the Scots said they could. There was not certain. So there's a couple strong economic factors. You could be a nation of Scotland, not in the EU, without a currency that's accepted by the rest of the world.
Well, we had to do the same thing when we got our independence for the United States of America. I mean, that's what you do.
Yeah, but Dee Dee, that was 1776 when we got independence. There wasn't an EU then.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. This should not rely on the EU. But, you know, look, they took the vote, and there are people that are upset about it. There are people that are happy about it. And the interesting part will be, if this comes up again, also that they let people over 16 vote, and also that they had, like a 90-something% participation rate. So that is a good part, I think.
Very impressive.
Well, I do want to talk about some of the positives about this, but I want to ask you, Daniel, a question about what would independence look like from the American point of view?
You mean from American voters and public opinion? Well, I'm not sure they were really paying attention, right? I mean, they might have felt sorry for the Queen having a near-death experience and maybe losing part of her kingdom. But I don't think Americans really care.
Let me ask you this question. from the standpoint of the Americans who don't understand the way the United Kingdom works in terms of politics. Now, I spent 4 years over there. Your daughter's over there. Dee Dee, you've got roots over there, and certainly Tom and Dr. Bard. But for folks that don't really understand the system, if you can give us a little background on that.
No, it's a reminder that the United Kingdom is very different from the United States. It's a multinational state. It has Welsh and Irish and Scottish all in one kingdom, and actually more unified and centralized than the American very decentralized system. What started to happen is Great Britain, to accommodate these different national identities, has started to share more power locally, which is something Americans would immediately identify with. And this result, which shows really it's a disunited kingdom. It's not completely united. It can't be run as centrally as in the past. It's going to federalize a little bit more. The British, of course, have their own word for that. They call it devolution. But it means they're going to be a little bit more like Americans.
Well, let's talk about power in the future right now. And do you think that Great Britain needs to give Scotland more power? Let's ask Tom and DC that question.
I think that the devolution process, which began a decade or so ago, is the right way to go for countries like Great Britain. Yes, they'll get more power. They should have more power to strike it more like the state-federal balance here in the United States, Mia, as you noted. This is a model that other countries try to use. Spain, in particular, trying to give more power to Catalonia and the Basque Country and other parts of Europe. You know, we've never seen a vote in Europe quite like this, where a national government is offering a section of its country the right to become independent peacefully. And so anyway, because of the devolution process, I think we can expect Scotland and Wales to get more power, as well as Northern Ireland.
Well, that's what David Cameron said he was going to do. So let's see if he keeps his word, and also if there's another vote, maybe Scotland will win that.
He's been pretty good about keeping his word.
Well, that's good. Hopefully he will, because they didn't get their independence. And it was split. I mean, you know, it was 45-55, but still, there are a lot of people in Scotland that are not happy. So he should do that. I mean, it's unfortunate. He's the one that's going to be granting that. And who knows, the next vote, Scotland may get their independence. I hope they do.
Well, let's talk about the economics of this. We also have one of the Barnett financial theory as well. What do you think that is going to happen as we move forward in the next coming months? And what do you see for the future right now?
Economically for Britain?
I think that what's going to happen is that Great Britain is going to be sensitive to all of their parts, their whole organization, and I think they're going to take a different track. I think they're going to try to be more focused on what they can do with more unity, more sense of where they belong in the world, and I think it's going to be a power play for the UK here. And
I do want to say one thing that I want to point out, in terms of unity, in terms of this was a non-violent referendum. They did this in a very classy way. So we're going to get final thoughts. Tom, Tom and DC, final thoughts on this.
I predict that within a year that the Great Britain, London will set up a fund for the oil fund that the Scots want to have with a 30-year plan on how they'll use that oil money to develop Scotland.
Dee Dee?
Well, actually, I would have liked to have seen Rob Roy and Braveheart come out. I would have liked to have seen that, actually. I mean, nobody killed maybe, but I think it would have been kind of fun. However, I hope it comes up again. I hope the vote comes up and Scotland gets their independence. I think
I think it's a good thing for the UK. I think it's kind of a wake-up call, and I think it's going to make them a little bit stronger and more sensitive.
And impressed by the fact that it was peaceful?
And I'd like to expand the focus and say, despite losing, it's going to set an unavoidable precedent for similar votes in places like Catalonia.
We want to thank our panelists. We're going to be right back, everybody. Keep it here to Fresh Outlook. We're going to turn our attention to Kashmir, where the magnitude of the deadly flooding is stirring in anger from both India and Pakistan. We'll talk about that when we return.